Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Brian's Table. I'm Brian Singh, and today we're going to be doing something just a little bit different. I actually have a guest on, and that guest is Ashley Bristowe. Say hi to everybody, Ashley.
Hello.
Ashley is a friend of mine, and I'm also good friends with her husband, Chris Turner. But Ashley is a force of nature unto herself. She is the author of My Own Blood, a story about her and her son with Kleefstra syndrome. But also Ashley is a talent all on her own. She is a housing planner by training, but she has done extensive work with NGOs. She's also a photographer, and she's also spent an extensive time in India, which leads to the topic that we're going to be talking about today, is Ashley's experience with Auroville. So Ashley, let's get into it. Tell me a little bit about why Auroville was interesting to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Brian. It's really an honor to be here. I've seen your work. I was really touched that you wanted to talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I spent 1999 and 2000 in India under the auspices of Foundation of Rotary International as an ambassadorial scholar and as a housing planner, and as someone who had spent a lot of time in India, I was aware of Auroville as a place, as a spiritual center, but also as a place of learning and as an intentional community that was striving to achieve some really incredible goals. And as someone who is interested in intentional communities and who I really value living in community and creating and helping community thrive, I wanted to be able to contribute to something like that. And so we made a point of going to Auroville to take a look at it as a potential place to spend more time and maybe settle for a portion of our years. So my husband, Chris Turner, and I went with our son, Sloan, in 2006 to Auroville. So this is now 6 years after we had lived in India. And we came to Auroville to take a look at it.
So you were studying intentional communities at the time, correct?
Well, Chris Turner and I had taken a long view on visiting and researching intentional communities for years at that point. Mm-hmm. And we were looking at Auroville specifically because of my interest in Auroville specifically and our background in India in particular.
Okay. And what were you hoping to find in Auroville when you set forth this journey?
So we had a 10-month-old babe in arms when we got there from, we were based in Bangkok at the time, and we flew into Madras and came down through Tamil Nadu. And honestly, I was so excited to go to Auroville. I was looking for precisely what Auroville says it is. Mm-hmm. An intentional, international community based on values of equality and spirituality and regenerative learning, and just so much about the way Auroville presents itself to the world officially had such resonance for me. And so we planned extensively ahead. We wrote physical letters to Auroville at the time. This is a long time ago. I mean, there was email, but I don't remember writing any emails. I remember this being on paper. And that we announced our dates, like months, maybe 6-8 months ahead. We said we'd like to come. They wrote back and said they recommended that we spend 3 weeks. And we said, well, we can spend 5 days just because of my husband's schedule in the country. He had other places that we were going. He was researching for his 2007 book, The Geography of Hope, which was nominated for the Governor General's Award eventually. So we had a research schedule when we were there. So they reluctantly allowed us to come for 5 days. But on the condition that most visitors to Auroville, or maybe all visitors to Auroville who actually stay in the community at that time, were required to offer a teaching or provide a presentation or give some kind of contribution, not necessarily not financial. It was definitely in the form of learning. Right. And so Chris gave a presentation. We booked a presentation space and gave an extensive presentation on the research that he was compiling for the Geography of Hope, which was a guided tour of the world we need. So all of these kind of solutions at that time, the conversation around the clean energy economy was, oh, we can't afford to make these big changes. It's too hard to invent all these new things. And what Chris was looking at was actually the world already has so many of these solutions. We just need to put them in place. And so that was what we offered.
And I know it's interesting because Auroville was doing some cutting edge research at that time. You know, they had the solar cooker, all these things that I know I talked about in the video that I really wanted to see. But tell me about the application procedure. I know that they're very big on research and sharing of research there. And I know that that's the way that they set up the various institutes on site. But tell me a little bit about that procedure of getting to that 5 days and what happened over those 5 days.
Sure. I mean, we were doing a lot of research in that period, so I don't really remember the specifics. I know, of course, this is now 19 years ago, so
it's crazy, isn't it?
My intel is old, but this was our experience, and that's what I'm sharing. We had to stay at one of a certain number of guest houses. We stayed with a family in a family compound that was primarily French guests from France and Belgium. The family that ran this guest accommodation, really, they lived and worked there. They had been one of the original families. The woman who was on site running things when we were there was my age. She had grown up in Tamil Nadu, a French woman with French nationality, and her children were fully bilingual in Tamil and French. They functioned in a French and Tamil environment. She was fully fluent in Tamil. She had gone to the local elementary school and middle school and high school in Tamil, had grown up. Her parents had been original settlers of Auroville. But all of their guests were French. And so the working language of this guest house was French. And we ate together in community with these folks at dinner time. Mm-hmm. Solar cooker you mentioned was in use, and they was in use or supposedly in use, but the community meal was at lunchtime. So they have a gigantic, beautiful collective, I hesitate to call it a cafeteria. It's more like a dining hall that is beautifully made. And ostensibly, the food that is cooked there is made with the solar cooker. However, we heard from people who lived at Auroville that actually the solar cooker doesn't heat up enough to cook until later in the day. And actually, ideally, the solar cooker would be cooking the evening meal, but people didn't want to go there at the end of their days. And so they would cook with propane or butane during the day for the lunch. And that was how lunch was actually made, not with the solar cooker. So there's a solar cooker there. They may be using it now, but they weren't using it at that time. It was just more like, hey, we have a solar cooker and here's your hot lunch that we prepared with fossil fuels.
It is something that I found strange because it was such a pivot. It's one of those technologies that is promoted as one of the key things that Auroville has produced, that you think that it will be readily available to be seen or being used in the main town site, which is readily accessible to visitors, which was a bit strange. But I would say I was quite amazed that they did have the water filtration technology readily available, and I did get a water bottle there. I know it was not a cheap one, but I did value that opportunity, and I did hang on to that bottle for most of India because it was a glass bottle, and I was using a lot less plastic because of it. So I did observe something that was contributing to the advancement of science, and that has been deployed in other venues based on the instruction of the Auroville researchers and the people who developed the technology. But it was the only example of that I saw. Was that a typical experience that you had as well?
So our experience in Auroville was, I'm ambivalent about it in the true sense of the word ambivalent, which means I both loved it and I really disliked it. Mm-hmm. I loved it in the sense that it looked the part, mm-hmm. and it all of what it said it did was magnificent, and you could see so much potential. In 2006, there wasn't the mercantile environment that you saw at the visitor center. The visitor center it had some signage. I'm sorry, I have an alarm going off. the visitor center existed precisely as you saw it at that time, but it mostly had interpretive signage and not, I think you could probably buy water there, but it wasn't a mercantile environment. And there was a restaurant there that was open some days of the week, but it was not a place that we hung out because we had access to other places. We rented a motor scooter while we were there, and we had free reign of the entire site except for the Matra Mandir site, which was the place that you saw that had the gold panels.
Yeah.
So at the time that we were there, that was being constructed. The gold panels were on site, but they hadn't been put on the Matra Mandir. We were not allowed to go inside that lotus, but we were allowed to go inside immediately adjacent to that inner sanctum, and it was a white room. And I don't know what we were supposed to be experiencing there. It was very confusing. Our experience in Auroville was characterized by my very high expectations and my anticipation of seeing something incredible, and actually feeling like experiencing a profound push away. I think you experienced this as well, that sort of, you are not really allowed to see this. You can see what we tell you it is. And I had the same experience, even though I got to eat in the community kitchen and meet anyone I wanted to and record anyone we wanted to. I was literally using a tape recorder, but like take photographs with a film camera at the time. But like we had access to everything. But we still received that barrier. Like at one point there was a singing, like there was like a choir. And we had been kind of like, oh, there's a choir, you should go and see the choir. And so when we arrived at the choir room that night, it was in the evening, and the choir greeted us at the door, and they were like, just a minute. And they went inside, and these 3 European people were talking to each other, and they came out and they're like, no, you can't come in. Mm-hmm. And it had been 4 days of being told you can't be part of anything. I was holding our son, and I just started to cry. Mm-hmm. I was just like, it had been just rejection after rejection after rejection after, and getting there with such high hopes, like, oh my God, like this is somewhere that I could see myself living based on what was on paper. Right. And getting there and meeting some of the researchers who were so earnest and doing such cool work, like in permaculture or irrigation, on some of the women's empowerment. I think you touched on that in your video. Some of that stuff and the education stuff was so in line with our philosophies about how we wanted to see our lives moving, and we wanted to contribute to those kinds of things. And then when we got there, it was like, you're not welcome, and we're hiding something. Mm-hmm. Hiding something from you. And Auroville is quite vocal about how it is an international community of people made up, like initially I think it was 100 nations, and in solidarity with the local people. And there's lots of black and white photographs of Tamil mm-hmm. villagers and white European people building stuff by hand together. Right. By the time we got there in 2006, there was very much a class divide in place at Auroville, mm-hmm. where the Europeans were riding around on their motor scooters and having, tea at tables, while the Tamil people that we saw were sweeping and carrying laundry and doing work in the way that you would see next door in Pondicherry or up the road in Mamalapuram. Like it had become it looked to us like a European playground, play acting at being an international community with all these equality and everybody together, kumbaya vibes. But actually you can't look too far under the surface, because actually the cooking's being done with butane, and everybody in the kitchen's not being paid at fair rates, and they're all Tamil, and everybody who benefits from this and who has like the shop with the high fashion and everything are the people who live in Belgium half the year and send their kids to university in Europe. The white people definitely had much more power in that environment, and it was disappointing. To say that it was disappointing, I cried. Not just
Imagine.
I have cried since. And when I watched your video, I was seeing you go through places. I was like, I remember being there.
It's funny that, those of us who are travelers and who have this experience of just plunking ourselves down in strange countries, you do have these cues that you're looking for in sort of like a mental checklist, as an openness to society, willingness to accept strangers. And, you have this idea of this intentional community that is there, that is embracing this idea of, there's no religion but spirituality. There's this idea of sharing ideas and the exchange and the evolution of the ideas that are trying to make a better world. That you're prepared to be engaged. You're there ready to talk to people. You're there ready to you're open and vulnerable to what the experience is, and you don't find that, right? What was it about that particular barrier that was a bit more challenging to deal with? Was it disappointment, or was it just
vast disappointment?
Again, I felt confused and I felt disappointed, right?
Yeah.
And I know we chatted quickly after I was there, because I did a post on Instagram and we had a chat on that. But and you did say that it reflected very astutely to what you experienced. So in terms of some of those barriers, what was it that was really odd about them? Because again, it does strike me that here's this intentional community that is supposed to be open to this model for humanity and trying to create this new utopia, but it does not feel inclusive. It's anything but.
It was anything but inclusive, but also the hypocrisy, the cracks for people like you and me who can see around the corner of wait a minute, why does it look like what's that? Like, why is it like this? Like, why you want unity and equality, show it to us. Like, I can understand keeping people out who want to get in there and be like, hey, have you accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as your personal savior?
Right, of course, right?
I completely understand keeping those people out. Or people who want to come in and hey, I'm looking for a wife. You got anybody young and vulnerable? That's all people get out, right? But
also it's a working site. All right, so we have to accept that people want to do their work. They don't need to have people kind of coming in all the time and saying, by the way, what are you guys doing? It's so great.
Okay,
right?
But Ryan, I think that you overly apologized for that. I think you were very careful and diplomatic about the fact that it's a working site.
Yes,
it's a working site. They say. Mm-hmm. They say it's a working site. I would have loved to have seen more of the work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the Auroville in your video, and it is only slightly more forested than it was when I was there. The majority of the whole site was denuded. The reason it was actually chosen as a site, not the reason, I mean, the mother chose the site, but one of the advantages of the site was it was a low value piece of property outside of Pondicherry because it was all denuded land. It had been completely cut down. It had been extensively deforested. And when the community came in, they planted all those beautiful banyan trees and all of those palm trees and everything that you saw, everything, every single stick had been planted in the 60s. And other than some of the pergolas that you saw, I didn't see any new trees. I'm not seeing a verdant forest of permaculture, food forest or something. I saw buses, which is a great leap forward from what was happening in 2006 because the distances, Auroville is not a small, you were walking, which was incredibly impressive to me, frankly, because it's 33.
It was warm and it's India and it's very hard to walk anywhere on any roads in India.
During the day, at night, sure. But the distances are not small. This is the diameter of that circle, I think, is about 10 kilometers. It's a pretty gigantic site. So to be going from one place to another and realistically visiting the entirety of the site, which was what we were doing, we had to have a motorized vehicle because it would have taken you, and we had a child in arms, so and I was breastfeeding, so you had to. So to have a bus that just does that loop all the time is probably fantastic and a huge boon to those local residents. But you said over and over, this is a working site. this is a working site, this is a working site. Well, so is a construction site, but you can still stick your head in that little, when you go up to the like a construction site, they cut a hole so that you can take a look and go, hey, what's going on? Like even a construction site with giant cranes and people using heavy equipment that's dangerous will let you observe what's going on. And I found Auroville to be secretive and unforthcoming, and in what I could observe, hypocritical. And I'm extremely hesitant to criticize them because I at some level I still so adore what they technically stand for. I would still move there if it was the kind of thing. I am developing an intentional community now in Eastern Canada on many of the same principles that I've seen in action around the world, including on the specs.
Yes, let's call it the Charter of Auroville, laid out by Aurobindo himself.
Even the French woman who was my age, I was 31 and she was 31. She had 3 little kids. I had 1 little kid, and our son got sick while we were there. He had a gastro thing, and I was like, I didn't know what to do, and I knocked on her door at 9:00 at night, and it was like mother to mother. I was like, help me, and she was like, okay. She came out of the back with some literally a mud that she had bought in France that was in a liquid, and I don't know, anyway, it worked and it was great. But the next day I went up to her at lunch to thank her, and she's like, yeah, it's fine. Keep it. It's fine. Anyway, I had been at her door, so scared the night before, and had what I thought was a bonding-ish moment. And she was just like, yeah, just keep it. It's fine.
One of the things I left there feeling, and, I'm still in Calgary, you moved out of Calgary. I feel that Auroville was like the people that you meet at city council when they want to oppose a development. All right. It's a weird juxtaposition, but work with me on this. Is that they are very tightly knit community that works for themselves, but at the same point, any changes or openness has to be very carefully curated, because again, they are not going to be open and vulnerable to any of these other external influences. I felt like that.
I think it's less complicated than you think,
okay,
or that you're portraying. Turner and I came away with the feeling that the original founders of Auroville did it for the really incredible reasons. And then as they got older, they found that it was easier to take advantage of the class system and the caste system to have an easy life and spend a portion of their year in India where it was warm and lovely, in these houses that they'd built, in these glorious garden, environments that you didn't get to see, but some of the housing areas are with such cool, neat. You saw some of the Corbusier kind of inspired architecture, but there's cob houses there. There's bamboo houses there. There's tree house. I saw a tree house. There's really cool domestic architecture, vernacular architecture, and building with cement, and just really flowy and lovely, and with incredible, because it's Tamil Nadu, you throw a seed near the soil and it grows. Yes. So these beautiful environments that they're living in, and I think that these people kind of got older, their kids were raised, now they're fluent in Tamil, and they were able to, and they were like, what's really nice is to be able to have European citizenship, send my kids to university in Europe, have them come back here, run a guest house or a coffee shop or a gelato place, or rent the scooters to the tourists and sell $10 bottles to the tourists, and take advantage of the fact that Auroville sells itself on its ideals, and that there are some true believers who are coming and will work themselves to the bone and produce incredible work in this, that, or the other. And then they promote the shit out of that. But on an everyday basis, I think that Auroville, this is my suspicion, is that Auroville is a closed place because the Europeans who are there don't want to share their good thing. They have a privileged place where they have their, their community of like-minded friends and a few select Tamils that they all grew up with, and everybody else is either a source of money or a source of labor.
Yeah, I got the feeling. Before wrapping up, let's deal with the idea that we kind of loosely say it does feel a little cultish.
Oh, for sure. But not for the reasons that you might think. Like, it's not a religious cult.
No, it's not.
And it's not personality around the mother either. Like, it's not even following the principles of Sri Aurobindo. Like it's a cult in the sense of secrecy. Please keep the secret, because we like having our French-speaking dinners at our French-speaking guest house, and we are going to shun you if you speak English. Like, I was sitting with Sloan, and I ended up asking a question in French, and the entire table turned. They were like, "Oh my God, you're one of us!" I was like, "Okay," but I had to think about it for like 45 seconds before I opened my mouth.
I will say it does feel that in terms of the cultish, it feels like you have to pass that purity test, that you are willing to work with that sense of silence and be with part of that society, and that you have to overcome these barriers to say that you fit in. I feel that's what it's like.
I need to say that I think that there's I think that Matra Mandir that they built with the gold on the outside, it felt performative in a religious sense. Like, it's like you're only allowed in there if you're a member of the community and you've passed all these purity tests. But I also think nothing mystical goes on in there. And if you went in there, you would realize that.
Yes.
It's magnificent from above. It's magnificent from the ground. Yeah. It is like this. There's some incredible. If you have an idealist vision, there will be people come out of the woodwork to help you, and then you keep it for yourself. That's so selfish.
I know. I think that's the part of it that's a bit shocking to a lot of people who just show up there. It doesn't feel like a sharing place.
If you're building the future of the world and you're trying to save the planet, and your values are, the increased participation of women and equality of children and peace building and spiritual oneness, and then you just say you weren't even allowed to go to the community kitchen.
No, I was not.
You saw from what I understood, you were able to see just that one piece of the pie, right?
That is correct.
Now, there's so much more there, but there's also so much less there. Like, there was a vision for that entire area. And once Auroville started to get going, there was in as early as 2006 and probably before, there were definitely Indian real estate investors coming in and buying up small pieces of land within what was the defined area of Auroville, and putting metal fences around it and saying, "This isn't Auroville, this is mine."
Yeah.
So they were investing within Auroville, and Auroville couldn't prevent them from doing so because they didn't own the land. The local landowner had sold it to this outside interest, and that local interest was saying, "Okay, well, I'm just going to sit on this because you're European, and eventually you'll pay for it."
Yeah. Now, again, there's a lot of mistrust between, from what I could fathom based on some of the people I talked to in Pondicherry, that Auroville is in conflict with the neighboring communities. And the
It wasn't always, though. It wasn't always.
Yes. I will say that when it comes down to croissants, the French influence of Auroville and Pondicherry has transferred to the entire community, and you do get lovely croissants outside of Auroville. And so maybe that was the one transference that came.
That is not why there are croissants.
That's not what intentional communities are about.
Pondicherry was a French possession, Brian. Come on. That's where the croissants came from, not from Auroville.
Yeah, but you have to think about the quality of the French croissant was not really refined until 50, 60 years ago. Okay, we tend to have this romantic notion that croissants were always in existence and in this perfect form. They weren't, right? Think about how much research had to go into getting the right fat content in the butter, the right level of lamination. It's almost like how hard it is to build an intentional community, right? Because again, there's enough people out there who are telling you you should not be doing these things because it goes against this form of society. But there's a bunch of us who say there is a better society to be had if we just keep remixing the best ideas, right? But I know that I didn't feel that there, but is there, given the challenges that they're facing now, and also the national government having a little bit more of a say in what's going on in Auroville, is there any future for that intentional community? That's a big question.
I would say that India has more than enough room for every kind of experience. India is a gigantic series of multiverses, and one of the questions I had to answer at the end of my fellowship year, like you fill out a final report, and one of the questions was, how do you feel your host country changed as a result of your contribution? I was like, not Ashley Bristowe did not change India at all. Okay, like nobody's changing India on an individual level.
Yeah. India has an inertia on its own, right? I know. It's interesting now because I think that what we're seeing in the world. We could look at the rise of a lot of the right-wing factions that are going on around the world. But I do feel that the way that India has reorganized under the BJP, and also some of the deals that they're cutting with the Tata Group, and also some of the big industrialists, for want of a better term, the oligarchs of India. That India has already been well on that path. And also given that they are ethnically, they're diverse in India, but still it's largely a common brown population. The population is still, almost 90% Hindu. I know it's about 87%. So there is still that majority of one group that looks alike, another group, and of that same group, that they still follow the same faith, that some of these changes become harder. And so that when something like Auroville does show up in India, that there is this sort of, well, we'll see where it goes, but then there's this general, well, is it going to contribute to the betterment of our society or not? And if it isn't, then you start to see the opposition happening. That very much like how when the British left India, how that process has evolved now, where they're now putting all the statues of Winston Churchill now in the zoos. That's happening in Mumbai right now, So, it's interesting to see, an intentional community that was founded on this principle that it will be this international cooperation, that it is, you don't feel like it's evolving.
I think it would be a mistake to generalize from Auroville to India as a whole in terms of how it's reacting. But India has a rich secular history and a long tradition of absorbing and accommodating cultures from around the world. And certainly the right-wing impact on the political culture in general may have a distinct or specific impact on Auroville that we don't know about because we're not privy to it, or we just don't know what the local, people can get a very local opinion of something in India, and there can be like anywhere in India, there can be tensions below the surface that you and I could never, ever, ever have any access to understanding them at all.
Yes.
I think that's true in anywhere in the world, but India is incredibly diverse on the ground. As much as you might think that Hinduism is Hinduism, it absolutely isn't. It's regional and linguistically
diverse. It's crazy.
No, it's not actually crazy. It's actually incredible, and so
crazy in the sense of the diversity.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a very international component of India, and increased return migration to India from people who have been raised or born in other places or who worked abroad and then come back have brought an incredible cosmopolitanism to urban India that has changed the face of urban India over the last 25 years. And the internet has incredibly changed the access to outside ideas, but also the world's access to India.
Mhm.
So it's not the same place that when we were living in India in 1999 and 2000, that was the year that the internet entered India. So when we got there, we lived in Shimla, is a hill station up in Himachal Pradesh, about 10 hours north of Delhi in the foothills of the Himalaya. And when we got there, there was one place you could check your email. It was a printing shop, and they had one computer at the back that if you paid a nominal fee, you could check your email at this one computer. And most of the time, if there was someone there checking their email or looking at the internet, it was people replying to like marital matchmaking site.
Yes, I remember that. You know, the Hindu and the Times of India had this incredible, seeking spouses section.
Yes. So that would be the only person that we were waiting for, was like the mom and the daughter, or the mom and the son, or the dad and the son, or whatever, finishing up whatever they were doing. And then we had it for whatever amount of time we wanted, because nobody used the internet. Mm-hmm. That was the beginning of our time in sort of the second quarter of 1999. When I left Delhi in September of 2000, the hotel that I was nearby to where I stayed in Delhi had started with an internet cafe of 2 computers about 6 months earlier. And by the time I left, it had 2 floors of the hotel had been changed from guest rooms to just computers side by side. People were crammed in, right, looking at the internet and doing email and looking at porn and that's what a lot of people use the internet for. So that was what it was for. But
one thing that's hard to deny is that the internet has really redefined India.
Absolutely.
It redefined the entire world. But at the same point, I think that there was always that element of India that when the internet showed up, that they were there saying, oh, we need to just tweak a few things and we're ready for the world, right? And it's very evident in terms of some of the businesses that they've gone into, as well as the scale of some of the businesses that are there. But let's kind of move towards the ending here. Do you feel that in terms of the new India, and I know that, when's the last time you were in India?
In 2006.
2006. So it's been years. But I know you keep tabs on what's going on there, right?
Well, absolutely. I should mention that I have my second son was born disabled, and so he has a rare syndrome. I wrote a whole book about what happened to my life after he was born. And when he was born, we were preparing to go back to India the following year in 2010, and we had anticipated that we would be raising our children regularly visiting India. We had friends, extensive networks on the ground that we kept up with. I was the India unit production manager for a award-winning documentary in 2011. It wasn't something that was going to leave our lives, but our second son was born severely disabled, and that changed everything. So we haven't been back because we've been saving this kid's life, which we did, by the way.
Well, again, that becomes the focus of your life. Right?
It really did. That was everything. But yes, I do keep tabs on India. Keep going.
Okay, so just to wrap up here, in terms of all of the research you've done on intentional communities, and now you're trying to build one, what are some of the lessons that you feel that you could take from Auroville, and what you experienced or what you knew about what they were trying to do there in terms of building out your own intentional community?
Oh, I'm only going to say the good things.
There's some very good principles, and lean into them.
Okay, so really, really great about Auroville. They did extensive planning and planting early. Mm-hmm. They planted thousands of trees. So they took a quick look at what they wanted. They looked at their water courses. They looked at, the topography, and they planted along the water courses fast. Then they built out their forest based on grid lines of what they wanted where. And they looked at how they wanted their agriculture diversified throughout the community. So I'm looking at that early planting. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. So I'm planting early. Second of all, get your water figured out really fast. Like you have to have your waste management and your water figured out really, really well, because otherwise it's a time bomb. So waste management and water has to be like bulletproof. You have to have a reservoir, because especially now in a period of climate change and really intense extreme weather events, where you might have a whole summer where no rain would fall, or a winter where all the rain falls, or all the rain falls in a 36-hour period and then there's no rain. You need to be able to capture that water, store it, and in a way that isn't going to get contaminated, So I won't go on and on, but your water and waste management has to be there. You have to have like a clear plan of how you're going to accommodate people, and a schedule of like what you're going to do. Like feeding people, like everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to help mom with the dishes.
Yes.
You do have to do the dishes. So you have to set up a schedule and like chore rotation, and not make people do stuff, but you have to be like, okay, we're going to have a solar kitchen, and we're going to have it dinner is now at 4 because nobody wants to eat at 4, but that's when the solar kitchen is. So if we're going to have a solar kitchen, let's eat at 4. If we're not going to have a solar kitchen, we're going to do it this way, or we're going to whatever. So like communal meals is a really big thing. Right. Every intentional community that survives for long periods has a communal meal aspect. Breaking bread is a fundamental binder in human society. So it's incredibly important to eat together. You know this better than almost anybody I know. You know how food brings, and alcohol, and drinking and tea, and just that process
of ideas, just being at the table together.
Yes, I mean, that is fundamental. I also think fire is very important. Having fire be a part of how heat, cold, and fire being part of how you commune with others. So heat, fire, water, So like we have a creek on our property, and we will be putting a cold plunge near it, not for gain, but because the people who live on our property, we will be like, that part of that routine, the people who come will be the people who are interested in sauna and cold plunge, and bringing your bodies in alignment with what's going on in the environment, and making sure that you're healthy physically as well as spiritually. And that, I don't know, one of the great things about Auroville that seemed to be incredible about the community that did get to be on the inside was these people knew each other really well. And of course, every small town has its problems, but I think that the problems of community are far more valuable are far more worth it than the problems of isolation. Like we talk a lot about that crisis of isolation, this pandemic of a loneliness that modern Western society has been like just racing towards, these extrinsic values being so important instead of these intrinsic values, that we need this connection, but we actually can't be bothered to talk to anybody or say hi or ask about how you are or what's the weather like, talking those little small talky things. It's very important to have shared values around creating and being committed to community. Being committed to community. If you're not committed to the fact of community, then why are you here? Go be by yourself over there. You don't get to enjoy my food forest and my nice waste management and my water figured out and my sauna if you don't want to like also do the dishes. You got to do the dishes.
That's right. So you could. The important thing is to understand, to actually have all the good stuff, there has to be all the process stuff that you have to be part of. But also, I think that it's that social contract of agreement of how we're going to engage.
Yes.
Right? And which is a bit more tricky to get at. And I think that, one of the things that I think I left Auroville with was this thought of saying, I've seen what this evolved to. How do we start to open this up and make it better again? That's how I felt. Because again, the principles are there, but the execution.
But Brian, you can even say when you look at Auroville, the execution is magnificent in the sense that look at the scale that they've accomplished. Some of your drone footage is magnificent. Like look at the Matra Mandir site, like beautiful. The gardens, just the infrastructure that they've managed to build and maintain. All that stuff is magnificent. They have their water figured out. I don't know how they're dealing with their
sanitation done, and they treat a lot of the waste on site, which is incredible.
Right. some of that stuff is magnificent.
Yes, I know.
I don't want to bash them, but
No.
I felt really left out, and I my feelings are hurt.
No, I think part of the issue is, we have this expectation that our people do exist elsewhere, and that I'm going with this is that these people should naturally be part of this sort of like open-minded tribe that we like to think that we're part of, and that we should be willing to exchange ideas on the fly. But I do appreciate that if they also have, one, a working site, but also two, that there's been opposition and that there's always been challenges, that sometimes you tend to be a lot more resistant to that openness. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have to be able to figure out based on our experiences in Auroville. How do you maintain? Because again, look, we could talk about having, that communal meal, but, the communal meal does come with, is that part of the routine of the community, or is that something that is going to be on every night, or is that going to be 2 nights a week? Or, you have to come up with that level of saying that that's a commitment, but it's also a certain amount of flexibility that allows a certain amount of organic growth as well, right? It's tricky, isn't it?
Oh, it's so tricky. Like, one of the things that when you study intentional communities, you come to realize that actually they don't work very well. They don't last. Unfortunately, that is the ultimate and inevitable conclusion is, unless you have a charismatic leader, which inevitably becomes problematic, but a charismatic leader can bring people together, or religion, which works. It works. It holds people together. It's a set of values. God's looking at you. You got to follow the rules. Like, those are those intentional communities that hang together. But the kind of Western hippy-dippy kind of values, the communes, the draft dodger A-frames, the let's all buy in a community and we'll have our kids all grow up together. Yes, the first generation, it works. And then those kids grow up and they're like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
The Amish have the opportunity to go out into the world and see what it's like, and choose to come back or don't. And actually, apparently, the return rate is very high.
Yeah, the Rumspringa works.
But the hippie dip model, which is what is most available to you and I as kind of Western-based individuals that are speaking English most of the time, those other kinds of examples aren't at the fore. The hippie dip example is at the fore, and those ones fall apart.
Yeah, it's an interesting lesson that you can actually observe at how it's working in Auroville, isn't it? Very interesting.
I'm torn about Auroville. I'm torn. I want to be part.
I know. It's that feeling of saying you want this to work, but at the same point, not like this.
I want it to be what it says it is.
Yes.
And they say it is what they say it is, but they don't give you any proof, and there's lots of cracks. And like in your piece, you say something along the lines of data is the proof, and they're not providing any of the observational data is not supporting the hypothesis here.
All right, so I'm going to come back to you at some other point to figure out how your intentional community is working. Folks, I'm putting Ashley's coordinates down in the comments below, so take a look at what she's up to, and also buy her book. It's a very good book, and it also is a very good insight into how the government healthcare system works when you are aggressive and pushy about trying to get what you want, right? But it's also how it grinds you down in terms of trying to get what should be a right to you. So again,
about the book, let me just say that it's sweet and it's sweary and it's funny and it's frustrating.
And it's exactly who Ashley is. So stay tuned for that. All right, folks.
And it was amazing. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an incredible conversation. Thank you. I really appreciate you and everything you're doing on your channel.
And thank you for spending the time with us. Okay. And folks, and thanks for Ashley being with me. And here's another opportunity for you to taste the world a little bit differently at Brian's table. Okay, guys.